Good morning, people of the world and rebels. This morning, the 25th of June, the Committee on Climate Change published its annual report, which showed that once again, the UK government is totally and utterly failing to meet its own legally binding targets of going net zero by 2050. A target which is seen by the scientific community to be too late. The Arctic is literally on fire, and still the government's response is, let's do nothing. So, led by the XR professionals group, Extinction Rebellion are gathering here in a socially distanced protest outside Her Majesty's Treasury in London to say, do something. Your inaction on the climate and ecological emergency will cost millions of lives. So we'll be reporting on the action here and other places around the UK as rebel groups march to official offices, government departments, sounding the alarm and urging them to call out the government's criminal action that will see millions around the world perish. We'll also be joined at 9:30 by Dr. Emily Grossman on with her report on her interpretation on the report and why the government targets could be catastrophic to life across the planet. So just arriving at the action now, you can see there's quite a few people gathering. We've also got Fergal over there, my lovely partner in crime. Hey, Fergal. And he's going to have a quick chat with one of the XR scientists right now. So I'm going to pass over to you, Fergs, if Lucy's available for a quick chat.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi.
So just look into the camera here. So why are you here today?
I'm here today to mark the release of the Climate Change Committee report this morning, and also to highlight the lack of government action on climate change so far.
So this is this report comes out like every year.
That's right.
And we've heard that there's lots of failings.
Yeah, that's what we've heard so far.
Can you give like an idea of like, you know, how bad the failings are, or where we are, or what we need to be doing?
Well, what we've been hearing is that there's been very little action from last year's, which was described as fairly embarrassing and disappointing by members of the committee, particularly on areas like transport, making viable cycling routes, building more efficient homes. All these areas have had little or no movement on them at all, and it very much seems like the government isn't taking the committee's report seriously.
Absolutely. So the Committee on Climate Change is a governmental organisation that's put in place, and it's put in place to actually keep tabs on their commitments to getting to zero carbon.
Correct.
Right. So it's the government is now giving out to the government. So it's an internal governmental department that's saying to the government that you're useless in plain English.
So the government isn't listening to itself, and actually last year the government's own projections on whether or not they would meet their targets, that they were going to miss 2050 by quite a wide margin. But we're also here to highlight that 2050 really is too late. It leaves us with a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees increase in temperature and warming, which is a serious tipping point in terms of irreversible effects to our climate.
So 2050 is too late.
Yes.
And the government's actually going to miss this 2050 target.
Yes.
So by its own admission, it's going to miss its own target for 2050. And even the scientists, and you're a scientist?
I am a scientist.
What type of scientist are you?
I'm an astrophysicist.
Astrophysicist. So you understand the concept of energy, and you understand the concept of biospheres and the whole.
Yes, and I think more importantly, as a scientist, I understand the importance of consensus in my field. The sort of consensus that you see on climate change. It would be absolutely unbelievable in the area of astrophysics. It's nearly 100% consensus that climate change is real and that it is going to lead to unimaginable suffering.
So we've got unimaginable suffering. The science is clear. We all agree what's actually going to be happening, and yet the government's failing to act. And not only that, we just had the COVID-19 crisis, and we should be having a green recovery plan put in place. And the government's actually is propping up like fossil fuel companies instead of actually investing money. What should we be investing money in? What should we be doing instead of propping up fossil fuel companies? Or
I think we need to be investing in research institutes primarily. we need to find and quickly a way to cheaply make energy. And the investment just isn't there at the moment. It's just easier to put it into the same old avenues of fossil fuels.
And from a science point of view, right, the science community must be going crazy. So your own experience of like, what did you learn about like climate change while you're studying? Was it like out there in your academic field?
Well, I think the last time I learnt about climate change was at school, and it was very much presented as something which was abstract and quite far away in the future. It wasn't until relatively recently, last year actually, that I started to see Extinction Rebellion on the streets. At first I was just completely in disbelief that this could be real, that it was this imminent, that we had such a short amount of time to remedy the situation. Yeah. But using the scientific analysis that I'd learnt, I looked at papers, I spoke to other scientists and found out this actually is really true. This is happening. And I think as a scientist, we all have a duty to come out from behind our desks and support groups like Extinction Rebellion, to give our weight to them, to say, this is viable, this is true, this is being led by the science.
So you've got a few other scientists here I see today with you.
Yes.
Who are all lending support. So we've just had 2020, we just had the hottest winter on record in the UK in February, 23 degrees. We've just had the record February, the wettest February. We've just had record sunshine of the hottest spring on record. Look at it, it's 31 degrees yesterday.
Yes.
It's not looking good.
No, I think we're really starting to feel the effects of climate change. And well, we're not the first. Across the world, people have started to suffer from food shortages due to droughts and flooding. So, I mean, this is only going to become more of a problem. It's going to impact everyone across the globe.
And what's the idea? So we're in front of the Treasury today.
Yes.
And it looks like we've got a nice little core group of Extinction Rebellion professionals. I'm a renewable energy consultant. I work in renewable energy, and I got into this a very, very long time ago, about 17 years ago. Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, all that kind of stuff. And I started absolutely freaking out more and more with Extinction Rebellion. I love the fact that it's kind of like bringing direct action to governmental departments like this, and actually talking exactly what's happening. So we're in front of the Treasury, and it's the Treasury who actually sign off on where the money's going to be spent. That's right. Okay, so it looks like there's more police than there is XO professionals. So can you just talk through what we're trying to achieve here, or do you know what's the message?
Yeah, so the message we're trying to get across is that going from between different government departments, starting with the Treasury, is that they're really too late, that we need to start acting now. The money needs to be going into where the CCC report is saying it needs to go on.
Yeah.
So far, the government have only enacted one of the 25 policy actions that committee has suggested.
Sorry, say it again. They've only done 1 out of 25.
1 out of 25.
Wow.
And in 10, they haven't done anything at all of those policy suggestions.
Wow.
So we need, the time is now to act. Our time is really short, and the sooner we start making a difference, the better. The better our odds of staying below 1.5 degrees warming.
Wow, it's very powerful. I'll come back and I'll talk to you in another little bit until you're getting ready. I'm going to talk to some educators.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Here we go. So we got some more professionals here. Going to have a word. Hi guys, how you doing?
Hello.
How you doing? Do you want to have a quick word? It looks like you're an educator.
I am. I'm a teacher in West London, secondary geography.
I was going to say, Finn, what's your name?
My name's Finn.
Yeah, and so Finn, why is a school teacher here today?
So primarily before I talk specifically about education, it's about the future of the children. It's about the fact that the government are missing the 2050 targets that have been set, that they've agreed to, that they're only reaching 4 of their targets and missing 21, I believe, this year. That gives no future for the children. But even if they did get that, even if they did get the 2050 target, there's far too much risk. I was planning building a school with that much risk, or hiring a teacher with that level of risk where you're talking 50-50 chances, you wouldn't take it with our children's lives and our children's safety. And the government are risking that with this 2050 target that they can't even reach.
So they can't reach the 2050 target that they've set for themselves?
No, they've only 5% of the planned loft installations for their target were put in this year.
Yeah.
Car emissions and rail emissions have not gone down since 2010. There is some progress. You read through the report and it says many positive things. But they've got the easy targets. They've got the coal down. They've done good progress on coal. Over the next 10 years, I can't see anything that they're going to actually reach with their current modes of working.
So not only they're failing at a huge rate. And again, they're not putting the money where the money should be going into green recovery.
Yep.
From an education point of view,
so
where are you with like Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 with like education on climate change? Is that happening?
I teach Key Stage 3 to 4 to 5.
Yeah.
It's Key Stage 5 that they really get an understanding in geography of actually how climate change works. Actually the functions of carbon flows and sequestration that you need to understand, and you so rarely hear when you hear BBC News reports about the positivity of planting trees and how that's going to save us all. So you can understand that the general population just doesn't really have a good enough understanding of the science on that to question the report.
And what about school? I used to actually work with schools as well, like doing renewables for schools.
Yep.
So your schools, are they 100% renewable energy?
Actually, no, we have got some solar panels on one of our latest buildings.
Yeah.
But we are very old 1970s gas heating throughout with no air conditioning. I'm quite glad I'm not teaching today and didn't teach yesterday. My classroom during heat waves is scary. In the last heat wave 3 years ago now, that was just, it put students' health at serious risk, and there is no plans for how schools consider the health and safety of students within heat waves within these old buildings with very poor air conditioning, very poor ventilation. We've got to
so one of the recommendations, like within the Committee of Climate Change, is rolling out like tens of millions of heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, air source heat pumps, water source heat pumps, both residential and commercial buildings.
But they haven't met that target anywhere. No. There's one of their most failed this time round.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, looking forward to your little what you're going to be doing over here. One last thing.
One last thing. I'd say the bills proposed by the Teach the Future campaign need to be accepted very quickly in their recommendations for green recovery and retrofitting schools.
So just say that again.
The Teach the Future campaign, which is UK SEN school strikes and NUS campaign. Teach the Future. People need to contact their MP and teachthefuture.uk. As XR educators, we fully support the young people leading that campaign and their amazing motivations and changes that make.
Teach the Future.
Teach the Future.
And it's .com.uk. Okay, Teach the Futures. There we go.
Kind of the visual of the handing leaflets to make it.
Gonna pop this back in here. Can you hear me? So we got as you can see, the mounting professions behind us here. We're managing to miss, it seems again, missing all our targets from talking to the scientists and the educators. Committee on Climate Change, they have so many different recommendations, from complicated issues like F-gas, which is refrigerated gases, right down to energy efficiency of homes, to transportation. The recommendations for like a green recovery is to have, here we go, I'm going to spin around. There we go.
And then we raise the alarm, so in front of the treasury, and then we'll be alarm in front of each building. We will raise the alarm 5 minutes. Every minute we sound the alarm. So if you need some earplugs, I've got some here because it's going to be very loud. Shall we move on?
So they're getting ready to move over to the treasury. They're handing out earplugs for sounding the alarms. Got a nice big banner here saying it's too late again. saying the 2050 target is simply totally unacceptable. I got people here with lots of things to sound the alarms. Okay, we're slowly making our way over now to in front of the Treasury.
Sorry? Yeah, exactly.
So, ex-government advisor, how you doing?
All right, thanks.
So, why are you here today?
Well, because the government has missed all its targets, most of their targets, where all models say that we're headed to between 4 and 5 degrees warming. That means the desertification of all of Europe and the Americas below the 50th parallel. And that just won't support life on Earth.
You can't get any more stark message than that, really.
No.
It's a good banner. Thank you. I was going to catch up with these guys. So you can see these. There's quite a turnout today. It's a lovely looking building, Treasury, where they make all the financial decisions of the country. Most important financial decisions they're making at the moment is about where the recovery package is going to go for stimulating the economy. And at the moment it's quite bad because it looks like it's actually going into the wrong direction.
The oil drum works quite well as a lectern, doesn't it?
That, what is it?
An oil drum.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We did have the locked-on boxes out this silly, the police have confiscated.
Oh, really?
Well, we don't know if you're going to lock on and stay here all day.
Well, there was. Well, I see that 4 police vans have all moved. What's that? Yeah. Oh, I'm quite happy to keep talking. Oh, Irish. Yeah. So you can see preparation going on here. We've got the got blood.
Yeah, smells absolutely yummy.
Right. There we go.
Yeah, carrot syrup is the base of it. I'm not really stuff.
So we've got lots of blood. All the different professions behind here.
Well, I'm reaching out now to. I just explained what we do.
So there's an air of stillness on this morning, 25th of June. On this day, well, 27th of June last year, United Kingdom government declared a climate emergency. Monumentous a bit of recommendations from the Committee on Climate Change have been totally ignored. What's worse is we're actually learning that there's been more money getting pumped into the fossil fuel industries, still getting supported on the tax breaks. We talk about green recovery and what we need for green recovery. We need to be pumping all that money into decarbonising grid, our electrical grid, carbon grid, a gas grid. you work for Shell? We got the CEO of Shell just here. He's got a lot of blood on his hands. We've got a captive audience behind us here. Here at One Horse Guard Road. They're just doing a mic check. So how does it feel having so much blood on your hands, Mr. Shell executive?
It's very comforting.
Very comforting.
It's like it's a nice moisturizer for my palms.
Yeah.
What do you think? What about blood?
How are your hands?
My hands are fine. I don't know. My hair makes you younger.
So how many lives are you destroying?
I don't think you're doing it. What do you mean destroying lives?
Well, you know, all your fossil fuel extraction, all the blood on your hands, working for Shell, pumping all those billions into more
Extraction.
Mm-hmm.
Destroying lives. I'm not sure what you're talking about. What's
There you go. Denial.
Where's the science?
Denial. Denial. This is what we got. These are the people who prop up governments. He's running away.
Carbon neutral by 2050. And we'll do it after 3.5 years of wrangling and digging. We in this government will do whatever we can to reach out across the House, to find common ground, to heal the divisions of our country, and to find a new and generous spirit in which we conduct all our political dealings with one another that will last beyond this immediate season of Christmas goodwill. And in that spirit, Mr. Speaker, I congratulate you once again on your election, and I look forward to months and years ahead under your guidance.
Where I think we can safely say every point that needs to be made has been made, although not by every single speaker. We all know exactly what is needed to make a good deal here in Paris. We need a deal that keeps 2 degrees alive, a deal with a binding mechanism, a deal that has a 5-year review so we can see how we're doing, a deal for the poorest and most vulnerable countries in terms of finance, a deal so that we can measure and verify what happens with the agreement that we make, and a deal that transfers technology from the richest countries to the poorest countries. So let me, in my 3 minutes, take this argument the other way round. Not what we need to succeed. We all know that. But let's just imagine for a moment what we would have to say to our grandchildren if we failed. We'd have to say it was all too difficult. And they would reply, well, what was so difficult? What was it that was so difficult when the Earth was in peril? When the sea levels were rising in 2015, when crops were failing, when deserts were expanding, what was it that was so difficult? Was it difficult to agree on 2 degrees? Was it difficult when 97% of scientists the world over have said that climate change is urgent and man-made and must be addressed? When there are over 4,000 pieces of literature and reviews making exactly this point? Why was, they would ask us, sticking to 2 degrees at least above industrial levels so difficult? Presumably, we might have to say, well, it was difficult to reach a binding agreement. But they would ask us, why is it difficult to reach a legally binding agreement when in 2015 there are already 75 countries, including countries across most of the continents of our world, that already have legally binding climate change legislation? Global climate is one of the many stories knocked off the front pages by this pandemic, but even as the world economy stalls, it's still there. In a remarkable new Netflix film, David Attenborough is looking back on his life, coming up with some possible ways to deal with the immense challenges facing the planet. It isn't all bad news. I talked to him at the World Wildlife Fund's Colin Buckley just before social distancing was introduced, and I asked David about coronavirus, of course, but first he explained why he had agreed to make what he called his own personal witness statement on climate change.
I am David Attenborough, and I am 93. I've had the most extraordinary life. It's only now that I appreciate how extraordinary. The living world is a unique and spectacular marvel. Yet the way we humans live on Earth is sending it into a decline. Human beings have overrun the world. We're replacing the wild with the tame. This film is my witness statement and my vision of the future. The story of how we came to make this our greatest mistake. How, yet now, we can yet put it right. It was okay that the temperature was because combat spend
for them, and I'm in this for me, and I'm in this for all those who lost their lives to these devastating crises. Because take a minute, think about it. When you look in the mirror, what do you see? I see my grandmother struggles living through me. I see my motherland praying for peace. I see a bare land where there's not much to eat, nor water to drink. But my people, for my people, for my people, So when those in the house come making a mockery and ask why we're skipping school for something so silly, tell them this. Tell them that their solutions aren't enough. Tell them that this is our democracy.
Woo!
Being here is a real positive feeling, a real message of hope for a generation that are tired of not having their voices heard and not being listened to, and fed up with knowing of a planet that we will have to deal with unless the government decides to listen to us today and listen to the future of their own country. And all of these 28 by the time the tour was we're doing it for 5 minutes. Really have just moved in, arrested actually one of the tactics of the group here. They're describing this action as non-violent civil disobedience.
First time I've ever been arrested. First time I've ever been in a protest of this importance. I really feel that nothing is being done to combat climate change.
there's no use to change it. So, civil disobedience. So it should change.
If this was anything but okay for people, there would have been all police officers and a big problem.
It's just that, we're letting incompetent little 17,000 people who want to tell us how to live our lives. That's what you are.
Millions of people are going to start. I won't stand for people who won't stand up for what it means to live on this planet. And I won't stand for anything else.
Very good, thank you.
The climate change protests in London are entering their 5th day. More than 1,000 police officers are deployed to cover the demonstration.
It does mean another day of major destruction of the capital, already thought to be costing billions.
It's outrageous that the police force can't accept the date.
All the people of the government, for everybody.
So hello if you're just joining us, wherever you are on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, whatever your social media of choices. We're here with the Extinction Rebellion professionals outside of Her Majesty's Treasury, where you can see quite intriguing performances going on in front of the building. This morning, the 25th of June, the Committee on Climate Change published its annual report showing once again that the UK government is totally and utterly failing to meet its own legally binding targets to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, which in itself is too late to save the future of humanity and all other species on the planet. So, led by the XR Professionals Group, that's why we're all here today, Extinction Rebellion are gathering here in a socially distanced protest outside Her Majesty's Treasury in London to say do something. In the creative way that Extinction Rebellion also do. We'll be reporting here for the next hour and a half, and other places across the UK. We'll be going to Cornwall, to the Forest of Dean, and this is part of an action all the way across the country where rebels are delivering letters in creative ways to their MPs, to local government offices, to demand that action is taken now. Why does action need to be taken? Because the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, have said that if we do not keep global warming to underneath an average rise of 1.5 degrees Celsius, then we are heading for catastrophic and runaway climate change, which result in the death of millions of people. So you could say it's quite an important issue. A bit more info on the action. The action will begin with a slow march that will move around Westminster to different government departments, the BEIS, Department of Health, Social Care, DEFRA, Department for Transport, Westminster Bridge, delivering letters to the government departments, raising the alarm in the way that they're doing outside the Treasury, urging them to call out the government's criminal inaction, and we'll be ending at 10 Downing Street around 10 a.m. We'll also be interviewing Dr. Emily Grossman at 9:30 as the report was released today, and they've been the XL scientists behind the scenes Caroline Vincent and Dr. Emily Grossman have been examining the report and putting it into plain language and interpreting what the results mean for the government and for our future. And let me tell you, the results are not particularly positive. So in a sneak peek in The Guardian earlier this week, The Guardian said the committee will highlight the fact that virtually no progress has been made over the past year to tackle the misery that will be brought on by climate change. So you can read more about that on The Guardian. Got a little quote here from Alana, who is from Extinction Rebellion in the press team. The government's lack of action on this should terrify everyone. Their absolute incompetence and unwillingness to do what's in the best interest of people's safety is astounding. The Arctic is currently on fire, for goodness sake! Exclamation mark. We have an opportunity now to build on a green recovery from the coronavirus, which the Prime Minister insisted was a priority, and it's becoming clearer each day that's not going to happen. I don't know what else we can do other than come out on the streets and take action, which is why Extinction Rebellion are here today. Let's get some more shots.
The other things like meat production, forest loss, and things like that. And also, this really isn't considered in detail when talking about climate change is human population growth. And we need to factor in human population growth when thinking about the policies and government directives in dealing with climate change.
Okay, yes, and that is one of the points that you talk about with your colleagues managing the growth of population through what is described as social and economic justice.
Well, I guess a lot of the indices and the metrics are...
So in November 2009, more than 11,000 scientists from 153 countries declared clearly and unequivocally that the Earth is facing a climate emergency. That's pretty unanimous amongst the scientific community. And these people have got degrees in all kinds of shit. They know their stuff. Without deep and lasting changes, the world's people face untold human suffering. In February 2020, a hard-hitting report from JP Morgan economists that was leaked warned that human life as we know it could be threatened by climate change. That's from JP Morgan. Whoopsie. And without action being taken, there could be catastrophic outcomes. In May, a letter on behalf of more than 40 million health professionals was sent to world leaders asking that government plans to have health protection and promotion embedded at their core. Unfortunately, at the moment, they are not doing enough. In fact, the report shows, and we'll get more details on the actual report later, as it was only released today, that the government are only meeting 2 of 31 key performance indicators that will see that it gets on track to be carbon net zero by 2050. So why is it so important that we get to carbon net zero by 2050? Well, the science is clear. Carbon dioxide into the atmosphere increases the effect of global warming, as it is a greenhouse gas. So the thermal radiation from the sun that heats up the Earth gets reflected back down to Earth, therefore heating the planet. Doesn't sound too bad. It's about 1.5 degrees warming in England. We'll have hotter summers. No. The problem is there will be desertification across the world as places get too hot to support water and life. People are already being displaced from their homes. We're seeing climate refugees all over the world. I'm going to stop now because they are now sounding the alarm. That's our professionals. Right, so the performance outside the Treasury is finished. XR professionals are now going to be marching across to all the government departments across the capital. Right, we're on the move. So, just a little bit about the CCC report, if you don't know. The Committee on Climate Change is an independent body set up by the government to independently monitor its legally binding efforts to reach carbon net zero by 2050. So the CCC report set priorities for all governments to demonstrate adaptation planning for a minimum 2 degrees, but also, that's a global warming, but also asked them to consider a 4 degrees global temperature rise. In last year's report, 4 degrees was barely mentioned. All they said it is prudent to plan adaptation strategies for a scenario of 4 degrees. 4 degrees of warming, we'll find out later from the scientists, will be totally and utterly catastrophic for many species, including our own, across the planet. In fact, even 2 degrees of warming could lead to runaway climate effects with the release of the methane that is locked in the permafrost. And methane in itself is a greenhouse gas. Once that melts and that's get released into the atmosphere, the effect of global warming will continue to increase. What a gorgeous day it is today. Quite warm, actually, weirdly. Feels like at least a degree warmer than last year. Oddly. Where's Fergal? Fergal, are you okay? Good. Do you want to do some talking now, Fergs? Okay, I'm going to pass over to Fergal. He's going to give you some more information about what's going on whilst we walk.
There you go. So we've just had a very nice live performance in front of the HM Treasury. The Treasury is where they decide where the money of the country is going to be spent. And as we've seen over the years, they've spent a tiny fraction on actually greening the economy, and they've spent tens of billions on fossil fuel subsidies, developing oil and gas fields. Over the years, we've seen them cutting subsidies to renewables. We're at the stage now with the COVID-19 crisis that we need to have a recovery, and we need to have a green recovery. And so far, the indications that we're having from the government is they're putting money into aviation, giving loans and supports into fossil fuel industries. The Committee on Climate Change is very clear. It's set out a roadmap of decarbonising to net zero by 2050. We obviously want to do that like a lot quicker than 2050, but it's the actual setting out an actual plan in place of what we actually need to do. So this plan that they've got in place, it's like housing, is we have to go and insulate and retrofit nearly 20 million residential properties across the UK. We need to have a warm front program. We need to have grants in place for actually doing this. At this moment in time, we actually don't have any of this in place. We also need to decarbonise our electrical and gas grid. So our options is using renewable heat sources such as heat pumps, which is electrical. Again, the Committee on Climate Change have been very clear on actually what's needed and the amount of technology infrastructure that needs to be put in place, and the amount of funding that needs to be in place to actually do this. And again, we're absolutely failing miserably on this. Decarbonising the electrical grid. We've got, as you can see, it's a nice sunny day today. It's my profession. I'm a renewable energy consultant. I design renewable energy systems. So today we're going to be producing lots and lots of green energy. But again, we should be retrofitting all buildings with solar thermal and solar PV, ways of actually generating electricity when it is nice and sunny like this. Then we've also got transportation, which is one of the biggest forms of emitters of carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases in the UK. And we've seen now, since the lockdown restrictions have been eased, we're getting more and more cars like these brand new cars on the road. Recommendation from the Committee on Climate Change is to switch over to electric vehicles. And the date that they have is actually way too late. But again, the government is, it's in the hands of the car manufacturers and the lobbyists who don't want to see this in place. We need to have sustainable transportation. We need to have bikes. We need to have a lot more bicycle lanes in place. Again, this is all recommendations from the Committee on Climate Change, again, being ignored. It was Lord Dublin, who's the actual responsible for the Committee on Climate Change. Last year, he referred to the government's response to the climate emergency as Dad's Army, which which just pretty much sums it up. They're not giving it the attention that's actually needed. I've got a friend of mine, Todd, who's going to spin around here. Todd, how you doing?
Hi, good morning.
Okay, are we okay talking about what your profession is?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, just speaking to the microphone, Todd.
Okay.
Nice and loud. What's your profession?
Yeah, so I'm an airline pilot.
Airline pilot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the moment there's so much greenwashing going on in the industry, and the climate report even said this morning that aviation bailouts should come with green strings. So far, the bailouts have been given unconditionally, and international aviation is exempt from the 2050 net zero aspirations. But the aviation industry needs to do its part too.
So just say that again. The aviation industry is exempt.
The international aviation industry is exempt from a 2050 net zero law.
What?
Yeah,
sorry, just say that once more.
Yeah, domestic aviation is included, which is only 1%, and the other 9% of the emissions, so 90% of the industry in the UK, is
international aviation.
Yeah, and because of the the complications of it going across borders, that's why it's currently exempt. But it's under review, and so far we have a offsetting scheme called Corsia, which is just a big greenwashing scandal. The IATA says that aviation emissions will triple by 2050, and by 2037 we're going to be flying 8 billion passengers per year, which is obviously more people than we have on this planet.
8 billion a year.
8 billion a year by 2037 with forecast growth currently. So
we're indirectly subsidizing it because we're not taxing it.
Exactly. We're subsidizing the industry by 9 billion per year, according to a recent report.
9 billion per year.
Yeah.
And aviation, as we know, there's you can fly from here to Malaga for 50 quid, and it's 200 quid going from here to Edinburgh.
So what we need to see is tax levies put on the frequent flyers. 15% of the people in the UK are responsible for 70% of the demand. And if those people just stop flying more, half of the UK don't even fly at all per year.
Really?
So it's completely unjust. And only 3% of the world's population are frequent flyers. 1 in 10 have never even stepped foot on an aircraft. So it's a privileged activity, and we really need to recognise.
Sounding alarm again. We're going to continue that interview afterwards. So we've got an airline pilot sounding the alarm. We're in front of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So sending a nice, loud, clear message to the Department of Business and Energy and Industrial Strategy. In case you don't know, this used to be our Department of Energy and Climate Change. Got closed down by Theresa May. It was the second day in office. She closes down the Department of DEC, which was quite crazy, really. Some people say, yeah, merging the Department of Climate Change with the Department of Business was a good move because it's all in one big, nice, big governmental department. But what it means, though, is it means that you haven't got the seat on the table. You haven't got the head of the Department of Energy and Climate Change. You read that? No. The 10 billion bailout for the aviation industry would provide a lot of buses for cities across the UK. Absolutely, this is what we're talking about. This is the greenwashing that's going on, and the double standards of the government. So the government's own report is saying it is failing, and it's failing miserably in its targets. Yet we've just heard from from a pilot, very brave man, Todd, who's not afraid to speak out about what's actually going on. And yeah, I'm going to have another word with him again about the aviation, because it's just absolutely shocking, really. And here he comes. Todd, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
I'm just going to continue the conversation with you.
Sure. So I just had to raise the alarm,
Yes, definitely.
Duty this morning.
So I have to say, I just love it, Todd, the fact that you're. I've spoken to you before, and you became aware of the ecological and climate emergency.
Yeah, so we saw each other at the Royal Courts of Justice when the Heathrow expansion was blocked.
Yeah.
And what a landmark day that was. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you're obviously as a pilot, it's like it just shows that we're in a way we're all carbon sinners. We've all got a carbon footprint.
Yeah.
No matter what we do, we'll wake up in the morning to go to bed at night. Could be consuming meat, electricity, transportation.
Yeah.
And you're working in the aviation industry.
Yeah, we're all hypocrites, and I've come to the conclusion now that I can no longer fly passenger jets.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've been following the movement for a couple of years, and I have to align my morals with my actions, and I know what damage the industry is doing. It's quickly becoming the most polluting industry.
Yeah.
Currently, it's about 5 or 6% of global emissions, but with every other industry decreasing, it could well take up a country's entire budget alone if the current forecast growth continues. So, yeah.
I've actually read that the reason that we have to have carbon capture technology, which is also in the CCC report, is because of aviation.
Yeah, exactly. So, and when we talk about alternatives to aviation, biofuels. The energy required to make a synthetic fuel, there's currently not enough renewable energy in the world to create that synthetic fuel. So by us focusing on aviation growth, we're taking renewable energy away from other sectors that are trying to decarbonize, and the knock-on effect of that. So there are no green alternatives in the short to medium term for flying at all. The only option is to reduce the sector, and you know, to reduce real-time emissions.
Absolutely, and it's very powerful. You know, and aviation industry is like, you know, it's an area that nobody really wants to talk about.
Exactly, yeah.
Because there's no alternative, like you said.
Yeah.
We're at our next stop here, which is which building is this? Do you know?
I don't actually know. But secret.
So let's go and have a quick chat to see where we are now. Finn, which building is this?
The Department of Health and Social Care.
Department of Health and Social Care. The alarm for the Department of Health and Social Care. Department of Social Care. That's been gone. So fill us in. This is the Department of?
The Department for Health and Social Care.
Oh, Health and Social Care. So all the departments, like the health of the country, you know, knowing what's going to happen with ecological and climate meltdown, these guys should be taking action.
That's true, and this is exactly the problem that the CCC identified, that they're not building any kind of resilience into government processes, into the sectors across the country, and they say they see no progress even for a 2 degrees of warming to protect resilience, and departments like health, like education, really need to be pushing this right now.
So we talked to some we talked to some doctors about this, expert doctors, and it's been highlighted in the LANS report that climate change is going to be worse than COVID-19 in terms of, like, you know, it's the healthcare not being able to help. We're going to have like malaria, we're going to have like a breakdown, like heat strokes, and so these guys here should be taking action.
Yes, we need to fundamentally think about not only what departments can do to reduce emissions through mitigation, but the adaptation required to help the changes that are going to happen at 1.5 at 2 degrees. There is no future where there is no climate change, and there is a future with very, very scary climate change, as we can see currently happening in Siberia.
Oh, it's very noisy here. So yeah, let's hope that like some people in there are taking a little bit of note what's going on.
It would be really nice, but I worry that even individuals won't be able to make a difference without a huge change from the government in how they see this crisis.
Yeah, so we need the government really to step in and this time last year, I was saying that like we actually 27th of June is when we declared a climate emergency. The UK government declared, and then 1 year later, you know, you'd never think that we're in any form of emergency.
No, there's not even there's very brief sound bites. There was one sound bite from Boris Johnson of building a green economy, with no action tied to it, or just not enough. Only through reduction of coal, which of course we need to do.
Which is the easy win. Easy win. Yeah. Okay, let's go. Another educator, have a quick word. How you doing? Good. So, as an educator, teacher, you're busy sounding the alarm as always.
We are, unfortunately, and it's really scary that we have to be here today, having had a look over some of the reports.
Yeah.
It's really scaring me personally. And it should really be scaring all of us that the government is so far behind on the 2050 target, which we already know is too late. And yet the government is still continuing on with projects such as HS2, which won't be carbon neutral for 120 years. Yet we're supposed to be carbon neutral by 2050. So it's really scary that this report has come out and just reiterated what we really expect.
Yeah, we're walking this way. We can walk and talk. Yeah, so obviously this report's come out, and it's again naming and shaming the government. The one that came out last year lambasted the government and said it was an absolute farcical of our response for the fact that it's been acknowledged, especially with all the scientists here.
Exactly. And if you have a look as well, I mean, looking at the report, nothing's changed from last year.
There you go. Sorry, just doing it. So yeah, nothing's
changed from last year. Their targets, they haven't even met. They're going backwards in places, this new report shows.
Yeah.
So what are the government actually doing?
So,
what are they doing for us? They've proved to us in COVID that they're incompetent, and they're proving us to more and more that they're incompetent. I think we really need this government, something to happen for this government to actually act now, and that means we need to be getting back out on the streets. We need to be raising this alarm at home or in person.
Yeah, it seems to be the only way they listen. The only time they sat up and listened was last year when we blocked the road, we blocked the streets. We took it to them. We said, no, this is not acceptable, and people were giving themselves up to get arrested.
Exactly, and I think people have to understand as well that we do have power as people. If you look at just last week, the campaign to get free school meals over the lunch holidays was just behind some celebrity endorsement and people power. That's all we need is the people power.
Yeah.
So just come together. As I said, whether that be out on the streets or whether that be at home, write letters to your MPs, shout. The more of us that shout, the more is being heard. And as you said, last year we did a 2-week rebellion in April almost, and then the government declared a climate emergency just over a week later.
Yeah, over a week later, and then it's a year on the 27th of June, and diddly squats happened.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think there was any form of emergency going on.
No.
We've got record temperatures in Siberia at the moment. We've got algae growth in the Arctic that we haven't seen before. We've got all these indicators that the climate is accelerating, and yet the government's still not acting.
And in fact, not only they're not acting, they're acting against it. So they're continuing with projects, as I said, like HS2, which are not carbon neutral.
Yeah.
And there's many campaigners, there's so many problems with that. Anyways, but I don't understand how the government can continue on with these projects that aren't in line with their legal obligations for it's legally binding, isn't it?
It's legally binding targets. So the government, by its own admission, is missing its own legally binding targets.
So what also I don't understand is this government's missing its targets, yet in September wants to bring in a baseline assessment for 4-year-olds. So this is a government that cannot meet its own targets, yet wants your children at home at 4 years old to sit an exam to track them all the way through secondary school. Now, it doesn't matter what the teachers say, what the government says. I used to work with Ofqual. I used to work in assessments. Unfortunately, this assessment for 4-year-olds is going to ruin children, ruin teaching. It is so unfair. And then the government can't even meet its own targets.
And speaking of the Department of Education, where do you think we're going now?
Well, I think we're walking past the Department of Education. They're not actually mentioned in the report.
Yeah.
I know you've spoken with some of the educators.
But it's vital, the fact that the people are educated what's happening.
Without a doubt. And at the moment, in fact, this department has
which, as we heard, is actually not mentioned in the report, but it's actually vital that You know, all the different departments, every department in the government should be focused first and foremost of everything that they do to do with the climate emergency, and that's including the Department of Education. So we're going to send the alarm again. That's really loud.
So hello, if you're just joining us, welcome to this Exile Professionals Extinction Rebellion protest in London. Why is this going on today? Because the CCC, which is the Committee for Climate Change, have released their annual report. They're an independent body that measures the government on their effectiveness at reaching net zero carbon by 2050, which is a legally binding target. Guess what? They're totally and utterly failing. Out of the 31 key performance indicators that are in the report, the government are only meeting 2 of them. And those are the key performance indicators that measure, are we on target to get carbon net zero by 2050? 2050 in itself is too late to mitigate against the worst effects of the climate and ecological crisis. So this is why Extinction Rebellion professionals are here today, walking, marching between government departments and sounding the alarm, and hoping that these government departments will call out the government for their criminal inaction on this crisis that will kill millions of people if they do not act now. So we've walked to several government departments already. We find out which ones. We've been to the Treasury, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, the Department for Health and Social Care, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and now we're going to the Department for Transport, I believe. We will be crossing live to a few other Extinction Rebellion local groups across the UK, because this is an action that is taking place across the country. Rebel groups from all across the UK are delivering letters and performances to their MPs and local government officers to demand that they put pressure on the central government to take action and to meet their legally binding targets to go carbon net zero by 2050, but also to go further, because we believe 2050 is too late. The science supports it. In fact, 2050 has been calculated to give us a 50-50 chance of going over that pivotal threshold of 2 degrees warming above pre-industrial levels of global heating, and that will lead to runaway and catastrophic climate breakdown. No one wants that, do they? So whilst we're marching, I believe that we will be passing over to our XR friends in the Forest of Dean and Cornwall very shortly, so we can get an update of what they are doing across the country. So we're outside the Home Office now. You might remember this exact lawn got dug up by government ministers not that long ago. Swap my cam over. So if you're just joining us, thank you for joining us. This is Extinction Rebellion Live. Coming to you live from London, where XR professionals are marching between government departments, demanding that these departments call out the government on their criminal inaction on the climate and ecological crisis. Why? Because the CCC, the Independent Committee for Climate Change, has just released a report this morning showing that the government is totally and utterly failing. So here we are outside the Home Office Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs and the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Too late again, 2050, that is the message today. 2050 is too late in itself to save us from the worst effects of the climate and ecological crisis. 2025 will give us a good standing chance of survival. What we mean by these years, it's the year that the government has pledged to go carbon neutral, so effectively reducing emissions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and offsetting it with measures that actually mitigate against carbon emissions. So when we talk about carbon net zero, that's what we mean, and the government is legally bound to reach that by 2050. The report that's come out today, it only came out this morning. We've been able to get a sneak peek at it, and we'll be talking to Emily Gossman later, who has gone over it in depth with Caroline Vincent from XR Scientists, and they'll give us a more detailed analysis of it. But what we do know is that they are failing on nearly all of the key performance indicators that keep them on track for that 2050 target. They are only succeeding on 2 of them out of 31. And now there seems to be a provision in the report to start planning for a planet that is 4 degrees warmer than pre-industrial levels. Previously, we've said the Paris Agreement said we must limit 2 degrees. And furthermore, the IPCC said that we actually must keep it below 1.5 degrees to stop runaway global warming. And here we go, sounding the alarm again outside the Home Office.
So our letter was not accepted because we've got to follow procedures. We've got to phone the help first. So that's the first department where the letter was refused. But they should get the message from from our other rebels that are delivering letters to their MPs. So, yeah, it's a pity that the department is not acting like the others and accepting our letter. But as the gentleman explained, they are following procedures. So I hope they follow procedures to save us too from the climate change.
Yes!
How many targets are they missing?
Nearly all of them. So hello, if you are just joining us. We are outside the Home Office and the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government and the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs.
Landscape. Just reminded me that I could do this. They're making music.
So, sorry, hey again, if you're just joining us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever. We are outside the Home Office with XR professionals who are marching around all the government departments in London to deliver letters to all the departments asking the government to act on their criminal action for not tackling the climate and ecological crisis. We know this because the CCC, the Committee of Climate Change, has released a report this morning that shows they are failing in almost all the key performance indicators that keeps them on track for 2050. So I believe we're going to be going to Dom first, who is in Warwick, just to see what's going on. Dom, I'm hearing you say you've lost audio, but let's see if we can go over to you now. Can you hear? Hello, Dom.
Hi, Christy. I'm here in Warwick, Leamington, but I've lost the audio. So, yep, you're waving. I can see you. Thanks for that. Well, I'm in Leamington now. Great. In front of the Warwick Leamington Town Hall. And there's a good group of us here today. We've got our letters, all got our letters, and ready to post them to the MP's office, which is right behind us. We've all printed off letters, and we've got a good MP here, actually, but of course the government needs reminding of what the urgency of this message is. Actually, there's been recent good news because we're here on the parade, and just behind me, you can see it's all been closed off to traffic. A lot of few roadworks going on, but it's all been opened up for pedestrian access, so that's been fantastic. That's a bit of good news. But yeah, that's it. We're all ready to deliver the letter, and we've got a little bit of event on later on at lunchtime just to celebrate this. But yeah, we're all going to hand in the letter now from the Warwick branch of Extinction Rebellion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dom. It's so good to hear you, and it's so good to link up with other Extinction Rebellion rebels and local groups across the country. And I'm so glad that we're all joined in doing this and putting action on our local governments and MPs to actually act on the climate and ecological emergency. So thanks for that, Dom. So we're just in London. We're just walking to the next government department. All right, a little bit of a crash just went on there. And I believe we're going to pass to another one of our local groups. We have got the Forest of Dean standing by. Matt from the Forest of Dean. Give me a shout when you're ready, Matt, and we'll come to you to get a quick update on what's going on. Caroline's got the directions wrong. We're going the wrong way to the next government department. Just while we're waiting for Matt in the Forest of Dean, I'll give you a few facts about what we know about the CCC report so far. The report offers scant praise and says actions feel way short of the government's targets, especially on adaptation, and they emphasise building climate resilience as a key theme. The other obvious themes are similar to the recent letter to forests, green job creation and international leadership in the COP year. That's the annual climate change conference, of which we are hosting in Glasgow. The UK is hosting. It's supposed to be this year. It's been pushed back. So there's a threat of increasing inequality if we don't act now, because the climate and ecological crisis disproportionately affects people from the global south in countries and communities where they are less economically developed, to actually put in efforts to mitigate against the problem. So the thing is, in England, here we are pumping out lots of emissions and living high carbon lifestyles. We don't see the worst effects of it. The worst effects are felt by our brothers and sisters in the global south, whose communities are being ravaged by climate disasters, floods, fires. I mean, the Arctic's on bloody fire at the moment, which is ridiculous. This increase in temperatures leading to heat waves, which leads to desertification in some areas, turning places uninhabitable. In turn, that means that people's communities, they're displaced from their communities, and we have climate refugees. The people who are no longer able to live in the places that they've called home because of droughts, because of floods, because of deserts. All these kind of things are increasing more and more. We're seeing the effects of this. But I think the reason that the government hasn't acted with such intensity like they did to the COVID crisis is that the links are, there's a long link in between cause and effect. Whereas you can see if you catch a virus, you're going to get ill. So therefore, they endorse social distance, stop the spread of the disease. With climate crisis, it's very difficult to see how burning fossil fuels can lead to death of people on the other side of the world. But unfortunately, the science shows that is the case. And England is going to be affected by this as well. I'm just going to check if we... Okay, we're going to go to the Forest of Dean. So, Matt, are you there? Hello, Matt. Hi, Matt. Sorry, your sound was a bit cracked there. Could you just get...
Hi, Christian. Yeah, I'm here. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you give us a very quick update on what's going on in the Forest of Dean, please?
Certainly, yeah. So we're here outside Papa's office, and we're just reading the letter that, to him about his inaction on climate change is going to equal death for many people. We've got a good crowd here, and we've plastered his office walls with messages and posters, just demanding that he does something much more than he's been doing already. This is the MP who famously tried to set off the Forest of Dean, 2010. His voting record on climate change is pretty atrocious, as per. So how we've got a great set of protesters here. We've closed the whole high street down in Cinderford in the Forest of Dean. We've got the police roadblocks at each end of the high street, and we are delivering that message now.
We implore you to show leadership, to act decisively, and not to let the lessons learned from the current COVID-19 crisis go to waste. Government inaction equals death. The science is clear. If we go above 1.5 degrees Celsius warming, we will set off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control, pushing climate systems further into chaos and devastating lives. A target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 gives us terrifyingly low odds.
So really delivering that message now. A few people in the shops and things looking at us. Hopefully they're understanding the message as well.
It's a great message, Matt. It's great to see such a good turnout. Sorry, it's really loud here. They're sounding the alarm outside another government department.
Yeah, there's a great turnout here. We're really pleased with it.
By 2025. We need you to go beyond party politics.
So Matt, where are you outside? What government department are you outside of?
Your inaction is a betrayal of all those you have been elected to protect. We call on you now to do your duty and take action on behalf of life. We act in peace, with ferocious love in our hearts. We act on behalf of life.
So this is a letter that we've posted on Mark Harper's wall. The government inaction is criminal, and it's a threat to civilization. And we're at this intersection of crisis, and we need them to tell the truth and act now. So we're now marching back up the high street. Police roadblocks still in place. So our message has been delivered. Will you listen to it? We don't know. And the report today is just highlights the inadequacies of this government and previous governments. They're not taking this emergency seriously, and we're going to keep pressuring them until they listen and act. So as we walk back up Cinderford High Street, again, there's a few people who are trying to engage with some people, but all in a socially distanced way. We're going to take our protest very seriously here in the forest. It's got a great group of Extinction Rebellion members as we march back up the high street. And they'll be reopening the road shortly, I think. Some great banners here. All of us together must care, and we need our government to act. We've got a drum at the front, beating the beat, like a funeral procession. We're all dressed in black to highlight the grave seriousness of the situation. We've got members here of all ages. One banner here says, "Too young to vote, not too young to care." And it's for that generation, our children and grandchildren, that we need the government to act immediately. We need the government to learn the lesson. What are they going to do with this report? We need to kick up a fuss. This is, now we're posting letters to Mark Harper's parliamentary office. A number of letters have gone in, 20, 30 letters as they go in. So he will get the message tomorrow morning when the post gets delivered on his desk, and he'll get the coverage from the news and media of what we've been doing today in the Forest of Dean. Another letter goes in. This is Mark Harper, the House of Commons. Yeah, he's going to have a full post bag tomorrow. As we post those letters, each one sent in with just a feeling of hopefulness that they actually do something and listen to us. Okay, I think I should hand back to London now, as we are nearing the end of our letter posting. We must have at least 30 letters have gone into the post box today. On the high street now, the police roadblock is bringing the traffic up now behind us as we walk up towards the end of our point, where we'll probably have a bit of a regen session, and yeah, then go home and read the news about this report and spread the word. So we continue to march up the high street.
Thanks very much, Matt. That's amazing. It's so good to see that is such a good turnout there, and that this is happening all over the country.
Brilliant. Thank you, Christian.
Thanks. See you later. Good luck with your regen. So thanks. That was Matt from the Forest of Dean. So there's lots of XR groups across the country. who are doing similar actions today. And now we're going to Nick. You can see him there, already in his mask, socially distanced. Good to see. Nick from Cornwall, can you give us a very quick report about what's going on in your local area today, and what actions have you taken given the results of the Committee on the Climate Change report?
Well, good morning, everybody. A pleasure to be joining you. We're live outside MP at UK. We've actually got lots of actions taking place all over Cornwall today. There's going to be a very big action down off Gilly Beach in Falmouth later on. But so far, this is our local MP. I'm joined with other rebels from St Austell and Newquay, because this is his constituency. I think today is a really important day on release of the Climate Change Committee report. From just having a skim through that, one of the biggest failings that said was about inadequate leadership of our government. And this is actually a report that's been produced by an independent committee. So it's fairly neutral. But I'm just going to spin round so you can see some of the people who are here. Okay, so here we are outside with just a few of the rebels. So all socially distanced and wearing masks. We've chosen to all wear black today to go in line with people who are in the global south, the people and millions of people who have already died as a result of a climate catastrophe of what we're amongst. So we've got some letters that we're going to be delivering. So through the door here of his office, something that I've done for Steve. I've bought him a copy of the Uninhabitable Earth, a couple of XR stickers on there. And we've signed that. So, dear Steve, a gift from XR St Austell and UK. So I'm going to pop that through the door for him. Hopefully, when he's going to vote in Parliament and he's doing his long train rides down to London, that can be a bit of reading for him. So I'm not sure if other rebels want to post their things now, take their things through. What's the
2050 is too late anyway, and the report that's going to be released later is likely to say that we're not en route for that either. We need to do that now.
Awesome, thank you.
Steve Double is one of the people who thinks that the problem of the climate emergency is caused by overpopulation of the planet. I wish he would come to the ex-colony of Zambia and see what our lifestyle does to the global south.
Thank you, Chrissy. As it happens, we've actually just got the local press arriving, the St Austell Voice. So our local newspaper has obviously come to follow us. So perhaps we'd like them to have a word with us as well. So do you want to just post it and then perhaps you'd like to talk to us?
So basically, I'm here today because I'm frankly terrified by the goal of net zero emissions by 2050. It's nowhere near soon enough. You know, there's basic things that aren't being done. Why do we still not have a recycling system in the town? Why isn't advertising space being used to better inform people about actions they can take? The basics aren't being met. I'm just terrified that the more complicated issue at hand isn't nowhere being met as well. And so I'm here today to voice those feelings basically and ask for change. So,
Awesome, thank you ever so much. So, as I said, we've just been joined by our local press. So there's actually a photograph of yourself. So you're actually live on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube on the XR UK live stream at the moment. Right. So okay. Thank you for coming in and photographing us here. So we'll be here for a little while. So we're actually just joined by some other rebels here. How you doing? So with the local press just here as well. How you doing? You okay? So it's good that we're actually getting some local press coverage as well. I believe there's actually been actions that have been happening all over Cornwall, including, I believe, one in a neighbouring constituency of George Eustace, the Environment Minister, this morning. With some awesome photographs that were taken by Gav Goulder, a fabulous photographer who's very much in support of us. So just remember, everyone who are rebels, because we are all equal, we're actually here for XR and for the climate. So, but I think it is brilliant that SNOS and Voice are covering this as well. So
just get down a bit like that. Brilliant. And looking at the camera, please. Brilliant, brilliant.
Is somebody going to write an article about this?
No, we're just going to guess it, actually.
Oh, well, we'd like to see it before it goes out.
okay, so I've just switched to the front camera here. So I'll just talk briefly about why I'm here. I'm an electrical engineer. I was talking to a colleague yesterday, and he's based in California, and I was telling him about how fabulous the weather was here in Cornwall, and he was saying, oh, it's it's about, whatever temperature it was there. And we concluded in Cornwall yesterday that it actually was in Southern California, where he lives, where there's a desert. So what's that going to do to all the landscapes all over the UK? So another thing that was quite fitting is yesterday in the Arctic, 38 degrees Celsius was recorded. Now, from my scientific and engineering background, I was actually part of an expedition doing glacial research in the Arctic in the 90s. In those days, the glaciers used to go down into the sea. I've not been back there for many, many years, but I can't imagine how far retreated those glaciers are now. So climate change is real. Just in my lifetime, I'm in my late 40s, but I've been able to see the effects in my own lifetime. This is a real thing. I've got 2 children, and I feel guilty as a father that I brought them into this world. And I feel bad. What could I have done for them? So we're determined to do everything we can to stand up for what we all believe in and fight for what's best for everybody all over the world. So I'll now pass back to London. So have a fabulous day all. Bye.
Much, Nick. It's so good to see that XR actions are reaching the far depths of Cornwall, and to hear your own personal story as an engineer. So thank you for that. I'm going to pass. We're just arriving outside the. Where are we, Fergal?
Environment, Food and Rural Affairs.
There we go. Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. I'm going to pass to Fergal now because I've been chatting for way too long. So Fergs, over to you if you want to chat.
Chris. Okay. We're now at the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs.
Go vegan.
There we go. We're handing in, going in to hand the letter. It's getting followed in. That was a very quick, got more people following inside. Looks like a little bit of a party going in there. We're handing in the letter. So, there we go. Yay! So did they take the letter?
Yeah, well, I put it under the door, so let's see.
Yeah. We're about to sound the alarm here. Department for Environment, Food. Yeah, a wake-up call for the people inside. By Nobel House. A good wake-up call for everybody inside. It's very, very loud. I said about to the earplugs. One thing for certain, they'll definitely know what's going on. What a noisy bunch. UK, retake your target. That was loud. Okay. So, how was that letter received inside? Did they take it?
Well, there was nobody really to take it, but there were people working in, so I'm hoping that they will take it. I just put it under the door.
You put it under the door. I've seen you put a couple under the door today.
Yes.
So why are they afraid of a piece of paper?
Well, I think it's because they see us sounding the alarm and they are afraid to take a piece of paper that could inform them. They are afraid for their job if they take the piece of paper. Probably it's, I don't know. It's very strange that they will not want to be informed about why we are here because it's just an existential threat, right? It's we are Extinction Rebellion. They should know that we are peaceful and that we are just here to inform them and to give them information. So I'm really surprised that we had so much difficulties in some of the department to give them the letter. Department of Transport, I've got to say, which is the department which was one of the worst offender reported by the CCC. They were really nice and they took the letter and they told me that they will make sure that the minister gets it. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. So
the Department of Transport took it.
Yeah, that's
very
right.
politely.
That's right.
And did anybody else take the letter from you physically?
No, not today. Yes, perhaps the first department. Lucy, you had you did it in front of the BIS.
Yes, the security guard asked me to pass it through the door.
So you passed it through the door to security guards?
Yeah, they didn't even open the door to us.
So they sound like terrified of one piece of paper.
Yeah, I have no idea who they're going to pass it on to. They refuse to answer who they would pass it on to.
So you've had one person then take it?
Yes, transport was good. But we're going to Downing Street, so let's see.
Let's see what happens. Let's see if we can wake up Boris.
Okay, let's have a photo, guys.
Okay, so you've just heard there that they've been trying to get the their letter in. It's a one-page letter highlighting the failings of the government, and nobody from the various different departments have come out to actually receive the letter. One or two security guards have taken it. The other places they've actually had to physically put it through the door, which is pretty scary if they're scared of one piece of paper of a peaceful protest. So they're just doing a group shot of all the different professions. So all the people here are XR professionals. Everyone's they got various different trades. They've got scientists, engineers, teachers, educators, all here. Peacefully sounding the alarm and telling the government to wake up. Just about to have a nice group picture here. Everyone's squeezing in. Oh, here we go. Spin this around. Camera on the move. There we go. Got a call. So on this extremely hot June day. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. So the next place we're going is Downing Street. So it's going to be interesting to see if anybody from Downing Street comes out and actually accepts the letter. Just going to have a quick word here with the medical profession here. How you doing? What's your name? Chris. I'm going to stand on this side of you. In the picture. I see you're NHS.
I am. I love the way you say it as well.
Doctor.
Yeah, I'm a GP. I work in Tottenham.
Yeah.
But I've got the day off. Well, I took annual leave today to be here.
So you've just been dealing with one crisis, right?
Yes.
And now you're dealing with another crisis today.
Yeah, well, it's kind of out of the frying pan into the inferno almost.
Yeah.
Except obviously time frame's slightly different.
Yeah.
But this one is a far bigger thing to tackle, far more inertia behind it, far more momentum, and you've got to tackle it with the same amount of force. Unfortunately, we haven't got a particularly long-termist system of thinking really in politics, and we really need it.
So why do you think the fact is like, so I know I've met quite a few doctors and they informed me about like the Lance report was brought out last year that like the reporting that like the climate emergency is the most important health.
Yeah, the climate countdown from the Lancet. I mean, people have been saying this for years, decades. I've got colleagues of mine who are quite senior health professionals now who've been writing letters, you know, for decades to government, and you get tiny little wins, but they're nowhere near. I say wins, like tiny little incremental changes, but they're nowhere near big enough.
Well, keep up the good work, Doctor.
Thank you so much.
I'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
Okay, take care. Thanks. So we've also got doctors' professions on the march as well. Oh, and we've also got professional police officers joining in, which is quite nice. So just what's that, Chris? Oh. Yeah. You just get some shots of it. Yeah. Okay. So we're just walking over to 10 Downing Street now. It's going to be our last stop on this nice whirlwind tour. Oh, here's another scientist. Oh, Emily, yeah. Okay, no problem. I'll pass over. Chris is going to take over. Thanks, Chris.
Hello. So we are joined now by Dr. Emily Grossman, who has had time to look at the report in a little more detail than we have, as it only came out this morning. So it'd be good to get a bit of insight into what this means for our planet and our species. Emily, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hi, good morning.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. We've been walking now for nearly 2 hours, so I'm glad we're nearly at the end, but it's been very successful.
What's it like out on the streets?
I mean, it's great, it's a great energy, and it's hot. I mean, aptly, for this time of year, and we've delivered every single letter to the government department and made a big noise about it, and they're listening, so that is great. So what I wanted to ask you, Emily, is the government on track to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050?
Well, that's the thing. It's like the Committee on Climate Change is the government's own internal advisors, right? So these were appointed by the government, this committee. And last year, the report was incredibly damning. The government was accused of acting like a dad's army type approach to combating climate change. So we were really hoping, although obviously we didn't have much high expectations, that there would be at least some improvement this year. But it's absolutely staggering, the lack, not just of meeting their own targets, but also lack of preparation of how they're preparing the UK for what's coming. So the government set really minimal targets, far lower than they should have been, in order to try to get to carbon zero by 2050. They weren't being nearly ambitious enough in the first place, and there's been a failure to meet even those own targets. So, for example, of the 21 key indicators that were supposed to show progress towards meeting the carbon budgets to get to net zero by 2050, only 4 of those are on track. That's 4 out of 21. And out of the 31 milestones for actions that the Committee on Climate Change recommended, well, said the government needed to take in order to get to carbon zero by 2050, only 2 of those out of 31 have been achieved, and there's been partial progress on 15, which leaves 14 with presumably no progress at all. The report has also shown that the current carbon budgets that have been set, which is basically the amount of carbon we're allowed to burn as a country to try and get us to closer to carbon zero each year. We've already blown through several of those. The Committee of Climate Change are saying that we need much steeper reductions in emissions than are even being catered for by the targets that are being set by the government. And anyway, those targets aren't being met. So not only are the targets wrong, they're not being met, the actions are not being met it's enormously across the board, and the government is absolutely not preparing us for what's coming. So we're currently, if we don't put strong, radical and bold changes in place right now, we're on target, we're on course, we're not on target, we're on course to hit 1.5 degrees warming at around 2030. Now 1.5 degrees warming is what the IPCC has said to us. Well, they can't advise, but we know, the scientists know that this has a huge risk of catastrophic and irreversible impacts on our planet if we go above 1.5 degrees.
And why is that? People don't understand why, like 1.5 degrees warmer than pre-industrial levels, why is that catastrophic to our planet? Can you sort of put it in the basic terms for us?
Of course. So we are currently hotter than we have been any time in the last 2,000 years. Our rate of heating right now is hotter than any time in at least the last 10,000 years in terms of how hot we're getting, how quickly. And that's due to carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. Our carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere are currently the highest than they've been in 3 million years. And they are rising 100 times faster than they have for at least any time in the last 800,000 years. So any time carbon dioxide have changed, levels have changed naturally, we're now changing 100 times faster than that. And this is 100% certain that this is due to human action. This is due to the release of carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuels, from deforestation, from ploughing soils that hold carbon, also from methane, from cattle farts, and from paddy fields, and also nitrous oxide from fertilizers used in agriculture and from animal waste. So all these fossil greenhouse gases are going into the atmosphere. They're causing heating of the atmosphere. Now we're currently 1.1 degrees hotter than we were at the start of the Industrial Revolution when this really ramped up. Now 1.1 degrees might not sound like much, but that's the equivalent to 5 atomic bombs worth of energy going off in our atmosphere every single second. That amounts, when you spread it over the whole planet, to 1.1 degrees. But if you think about how much energy that actually is, all of that heat gets trapped in our Earth system. And that heat is causing rises in global temperatures. On average, some areas are a little bit colder, but most areas are a lot hotter, and they're getting a lot hotter, a lot faster. The poles are actually warming twice as fast as the global average. So what that's meaning is that we're getting heat waves, we're getting more and more extremes of heat temperatures, more frequent and more extreme. We're also getting more rainfall in areas where it's usually wet. It's getting much, much wetter because the heat makes more evaporation from the ocean. We get more water vapor in the atmosphere, we get more clouds. And when the clouds fall, the rain is more frequent and it's heavier. So we get floods, we get thunderstorms, we get strong winds, we get hurricanes, we get typhoons, we get monsoons in tropical areas, we get enormous downpours. And that's what we're seeing across the world. We're seeing huge extreme weather sort of violations. Extreme weather events are twice as frequent today as they were since the 1990s, and 2/3 of those have been made. 2/3 of extreme weather events have been made more frequent and more intense due to climate change, and this is already happening at 1.1
and
degrees.
This is killing people now,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
It's not just like a bit of rainfall or
exactly.
a few climate.
Exactly. This is killing people across the globe right now, particularly in the global south, particularly in areas that are poorer, but it's hitting here as well. If you look at the floods that there have been in the UK, we're also looking at sea level rise because the heat is melting the ice caps. That if you melt land sheets of ice and glaciers, which is happening, it gets dumped into the sea. Plus the heat causes the water in the ocean to expand and take up more space, which means sea levels are rising. So we are currently at 1.1 degrees, and this is already happening, but we are heading to 1.5 degrees, and it's going to get a lot worse. We're heading there by 2030. That's in the next 10 years. And by 2040, at the current rates of emissions and at the current rates of warming, we're looking to get to 2 degrees by 2050. Now, 2 degrees, we all signed the Paris Agreement. 175 nations signed, I believe, signed the Paris Agreement to say that we must not go above 2 degrees. mean, that was internationally recognised, and we must absolutely try our absolute best to stay below 1.5 degrees. At the moment, we're heading for 1.5 in 10 years, and we're heading for 2 by 2050. By the end of the century, we're heading for 3 or even 4 degrees. And scientists across the globe are terrified, saying that this is unthinkable. Huge parts of the world will become uninhabitable. We're talking about sea level rise that will cause hundreds of millions of people to have to leave their homes because they'll be flooded all the time or regularly. We're talking about mass migration. We're talking about health issues of intense heat. We're talking about areas where people can't live, where creatures can't live. And we're already facing the extinction of 1 million species due to human action in the next few decades as well. So it's not just the climate, it's also what we're doing to our species, what we're doing to our land, what we're doing through intensive agriculture. And this is going to get a lot worse. We're already seeing it here in the UK. We're seeing flooding, we're seeing heat waves. Some of us might think, oh yeah, it's nice and warm. But by 2050, we're looking at an extra 7,000 deaths every year in the UK due to excess heat. And we're looking at thousands of millions of deaths across the globe. By 2050, we're also looking at food shortages because heat here translates to crop failures across other sides of the globe. We're an internationally connected society. If crops fail in other parts of the globe, then that has a knock-on effect on harvests over here. And that it's, the head of the World Bank has said there are going to be battles for food. So we're looking at a level of heating already in the next 10, 15, 20 years, which is going to be catastrophic and have massive impacts on every single person in this country. So there are areas around the Thames, areas on the coastal plains that are going to be, by 2050, that are going to be seeing floods, regular floods. People are going to have to relocate. We're talking about shortages of drinking water. London is already pushing close to its capacity in terms of getting fresh water from its rivers, and that's going to get worse and worse with flooding and with heat waves. So we're talking about serious water shortages, even here in the UK, even in London, in the capital, by 2040, let alone 2050. And by 2050, in terms of food, because of potential crop failures, crops are already getting less nutritious, that crops are already going down in their yields, as well as getting less nutritious because of climate change and because of changes to land use and intensive farming. And we're talking by 2050, it's predicted that there will be 5 billion people across the globe who are subjected to food and water shortages. That's an extra 1.5 billion more than we have already today. And that's going to be particularly in areas such as like Africa and Asia, which are already in poverty, a lot of those areas. So we're talking massive changes, and the point is the government are not only not addressing this, they're not only not meeting their targets to try and bring emissions down, they're actually not preparing us. So in terms of what the government is preparing for, the CCC, the Climate Change Committee's report, said that they are not preparing us at all for a 2-degree world, which they're saying that we absolutely must be prepared for. That's what's coming in 2050 if we don't make radical changes right now. And in fact, the CCC report is actually saying to the government they need to be preparing us for a 4-degree world, which, you know, is essentially an admission that that is where we're going. I mean, they don't need to admit it. That's what the science shows. That's where we're heading by the end of the century. So the government are not meeting their targets. They're not preparing us for the world that we're going to be living in. And even worse than that, they're actually bankrolling and subsidizing more fossil fuel emissions. They're bankrolling new fossil fuel projects. They're subsidizing fossil fuel industries overseas, which don't get counted in our carbon budget accountability. So basically it doesn't show up on our, and they get to say, oh, you know, emissions are falling. Well, they are falling a little bit here. They're not falling nearly as fast as they need to be, but the government is saying, well, they're falling, so it's fine. They're not falling nearly as fast as they need to be to get us to carbon zero by 2050. But the point is that's only our terrestrial emissions, and they're only falling really in the power sector. They're not falling in surface transport, in aviation, in shipping, in buildings. That's where we need to be seeing the cuts. And the point is that they're also not even in those accountability figures for carbon emissions. That doesn't even include shipping, and it doesn't include international aviation anyway. And most importantly, it doesn't include imported carbon emissions. So it doesn't include emissions from the stuff that we buy. So basically, we're just outsourcing our carbon emissions and blaming other countries. And then the government's saying, oh, well, we're bringing ours down, which isn't true anyway, even if that was going to be helpful. So not only that, but they are bankrolling new projects. They're bankrolling new opening of new collieries, opening of new power stations that run off gas. We need to be stopping all. There's already enough oil and gas and coal in existing fossil fuel projects blow way over the 2-degree safe limit set by Paris. And we really need to stay below 1.5 degrees, remember. And they're not only continuing with those projects, but actually bankrolling new ones. So it's an absolute hypocrisy to say that, oh, you know, Parliament called a climate emergency or declared a climate emergency last year, but then it's utter hypocrisy because they're doing nothing about it. You know, maybe a few tiny little bits of lip service, but nothing that's going to actually cause any impact. And the Committee on Climate Change are also saying that these next few months are absolutely crucial because this is a time when we need to be coming out of the pandemic in terms of the economy. We need to be starting to lift the economy, but we're being told to buy, spend. We're being told to go and, you know, spend all of our money to put it back into the economy. But that's absolutely not what should be happening, because all that's going to lead to is more fossil fuel emissions. And actually the report is saying that what happens in the next few months is going to determine what happens for the next kind of few decades, because actually now is the time that in order to boost the economy, we have this perfect opportunity to be doing that by pouring money into industries that are going to be greener, that are going to be helping the transition to a carbon-free world, the transition to carbon zero. And that's not what's being promised. That's not that we're seeing. We're being told that the banks are going to be bailing out trillions of pounds to bail out the economy, but not in green industries, basically in dirty money, funding more fossil fuel industries, funding more consumption.
This is something I was going to ask you, actually, Emily. I mean, you've answered pretty much all my questions amazingly. You've obviously got a really thorough understanding about the report, so thank you for going through all that. But haven't emissions fallen because of the health crisis that we've recently experienced and are still experiencing around the world? Absolutely. And is that not going to help us out?
It's going to help us out, but the thing is they haven't fallen enough even to be within the carbon budget of what it's supposed to have fallen by this year in order to get us out of the crisis. So yes, they've fallen a bit. Brilliant. We need to be capitalizing on that. We need to be pushing and going further, not through lockdown, not through people going through the misery and the suffering that they have in the last 3 months through the pandemic. You know, no one's saying that's what needs to happen, but we need, you know, this has shown us, COVID-19 has shown us what the world can do when they put their mind to it. You know, in February, everyone was saying, this is going to be devastating. We're going to have tens of thousands of people dying, and everybody works together and everyone says, right, we're going to take action. Well, the climate and ecological crisis is an emergency, and we're talking millions, if not billions of people dying over the next few decades, and certainly towards the end of the century, unless we take action right now. But yet, when it comes to, you know, can we take action now to prevent that? We need that same sort of concerted, coming together action of people saying, okay, we're going to take sacrifices, nothing like the lockdown, but we need changes across the board in all the industries that rely on fossil fuels. So we need to phase them out. We need to move towards a green economy. We need to do that right now. And COVID has shown us that we can do that. And it's shown us just in a few months that we can bring emissions down. But it would be absolutely a travesty if we didn't use this opportunity to actually keep them going down. But what it's looking like, and what the government is certainly seeming like they're moving towards, is actually to push them back up. And that's absolutely what we mustn't do right now.
Thank you so much. I've got one last question for you. As you can hear behind me, they're sounding the alarm outside Downing Street now, our final stop, because of the report. But as a representative of XR scientists, and XR professionals, do you think that the CCC, the report that the Committee of Climate Change released today, has gone far enough to tackle the climate change issues and the inaction that we're clearly seeing from the government?
Well, that's a really good question. Of course, the CCC are crucial in terms of sounding the alarm that the government's own advisors telling them that they're pitiful and that they're not meeting their targets. That's crucial. However, it's a good question, because actually the CCC hasn't gone far enough to damn them, to hold them to account, because actually they're still talking, the CCC is still saying that the government need to get to net zero by 2050, and that's far too late. The UK government needs to commit to net zero even sooner than 2050, and they're not even getting there by 2050, but they have to commit to getting there sooner for several reasons. First of all, getting there by 2050 only gives us, according to the IPCC, the absolute gold standard scientific body about this, that only gives us a 50-50 chance of staying below 1.5 degrees. That is not a gamble that we should be taking. So let me repeat, getting to carbon zero by 2050, which is what we're trying to get to, or, well, that's what they say they're trying to get to, but they're not. Even that will only give us a 50-50 chance of staying below 1.5 degrees. That is not enough. We cannot risk human civilization on that. And secondly, actually, that figure has recently been revised. There's been new research out recently that says actually, for even just a 2 in 3 chance of staying below even higher 2 degrees warming, which we must stay below, we actually only have half what's currently budgeted in the budgets to bring us down to carbon zero by 2050. So actually we need to be halving even what we thought we could emit, which would bring us down to 2050 to carbon zero by 2050. So actually we're not in line. It's a total joke that they're still saying 2050 is fast enough. We need to be getting down much, much quicker. Plus, the UK has a historical responsibility because of our emissions is what started this in the first place through the Industrial Revolution. So we need to get down quicker. We also have a far greater proportion of carbon emissions per head, per capita, than many other countries. We're about twice as much as the global average per head. So we have a responsibility to reduce our emissions faster than other countries. Also, as a wealthier nation on the whole, I know there's a lot of people who aren't wealthy in this country, and there's a terrible disparity in this country with wealth, but as on the whole, as a wealthier nation, we need to be cutting our emissions far faster than other countries, or we're going to leave other countries with simply nothing, no carbon left to burn, whilst we're sort of pootling on down. We need to be cutting our emissions by at least 8% every single year from now on and get down to half by 2030. And that is absolutely nothing close to what's happening. And that's, like I said, even to get us to 2050, we actually need to be getting to carbon zero, net zero by way sooner than 2050. And so the Committee on Climate Change, first of all, they're not calling for us to move the target, which absolutely is what scientists across the world universally agree needs to be done. Secondly, they have sort of almost congratulated the government on the fact that their carbon accounting is going to start to include aviation and shipping, which is essential. Otherwise, we're just burying our head in the sand and pretending that doesn't exist and saying, oh, look, well done us. We've gone down a tiny bit, which is insignificant. But they're only saying it needs to include aviation and shipping from 13 years from now. So really, the accounting budget needs to include aviation and shipping from now, and the Committee on Climate Change hasn't been strong enough on that. And finally, final point is that they've acknowledged that the government has appointed a citizens' assembly, and the Committee on Climate Change has said, great, this shows that the government's making an effort to consult with and inform the public. And we at Extinction Rebellion say, well, absolutely, that's not enough. A citizens' assembly, it shouldn't just be a sort of lip service to say we're talking to the public. That citizens' assembly needs to have legislative power. It needs to have the power to make changes. And that's one of Extinction Rebellion's demands. So we need to get to carbon zero faster. We need to tell the truth about what's actually happening, and the government is not telling the truth. We need to get to carbon zero much faster than 2050, by 2025, 2030 at the absolute latest. We need to get a citizens' assembly who can actually take action. And the Committee on Climate Change are not being strong enough on those particular parts of the demands.
Emily, thank you so much. You've obviously got a real thorough understanding of the climate report that just only came out today. And thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts and actually being able to set out very clearly what needs to happen. And it sounds like a hell of a lot. So Dr. Emily Grossman, thank you so much for joining us today. And hopefully we'll speak soon.
Thanks.
Bye. So thanks to Emily. Just you might have heard behind us while we were on while we were interviewing with Emily. We're outside Downing Street, which is the final stop for the XR professionals, and we're just sounding the alarm and delivering a letter to the Prime Minister now. So I'm just going to switch over. One sec. There we go. Fergal, you off now, are you? Are you still on or not? Oh, shit. Sorry for my language there. Yeah, no worries. Did they deliver to Downing? Did they deliver a letter to Downing Street?
Okay. Did you deliver the letter to Barclays? No, so we had the letter for the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and the letter has got to be put to the post. So as soon as I arrive home, I'll do that and put it to the post. You do what you can.
Final stop though today, right?
Yeah, final stop.
How has it gone? Have people accepted the letters? Have they responded well? Do you think we're doing enough to raise the alarm?
So, no, I mean, most buildings were empty. So in most buildings, we ended up giving the letter when people accepted it to people who work there, and they will probably give the letter to the relevant minister for the one that accepted it. But yeah, we are here because the government inaction is killing us. I mean, the CCC report is clear. There is nobody leading. I mean, it's frightening when you read between the lines. I mean, the report is quite mild, written in a mild way, but you've got to dig deep. And when you dig deep, you realize that, well, the government is not building any resilience. I mean, they are leaving us exposed to 2 degrees, to flooding, to crops that are going to fail, to water shortage. And the CCC is clear, the government is not acting. So not only they are not acting on the net zero 2050 target, but they are not acting to build resilience for us to survive on 2 degrees, let's say 4 degrees. So, if,
they were late acting to the health crisis, admittedly only by a few months, and so many thousands more people perished because of that. What are the effects of them reacting late to their health, to the climate and economical crisis?
Well, let's not forget, right, that we are already at 1.1 degrees, and at 1.5 degrees, it's already a death sentence for biodiversity, and it's already a death sentence for some people, especially in the global south. So, it's not like, we are going to start seeing people dying at 2 degrees. We are already seeing people dying. I mean, there was a report in 2012 saying that we are nearly at 500,000 people dying. It was in 2012. So, it's going to be catastrophic on so many levels. And for the first time, really, the CCC is telling the government that what they are doing is not good enough, that it should be prepared not only for 2 degrees, but 4 degrees. And the government is meeting their target to reduce emissions. They are not on track for net zero. I mean, I can give you a lot of statistics, but, it's not going to be helpful.
Bottom line, they're failing.
Yes.
Government are failing, they need to do something now.
They are failing, and it's clear from the report, if you read it, that we've got a lack of leadership. I mean, let's not forget, right, that the Prime Minister was reported by one of his ministers, Claire Perry, to say that he doesn't get climate change. Yeah?
That's
so
a worry.
we've got a Prime Minister that admits that he doesn't get climate change. This is just the most frightening thing for people to realize, that we've got a government that doesn't get climate change, and nobody is showing any leadership. They are regarding climate change as another thing to do. No, it's not another thing to do. It's an existential crisis.
And no one wants to stand. We don't want to stand here in 30 years' time and go, "I told you so," as the sky is on fire, do we?
Well, I'm not going to stand here in 30 years' time. I'm going, I'm already nearly despair.
You'll make a bet. for our future, for our children's future, for.
This is. I don't know. I stopped saying how dramatic it is because nobody is listening, and I don't know. I don't want to say in 30 years' time I told you so, because it will be too late.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's hope they take action. So thank you for doing this action today, and thank you for sounding the alarm.
Pleasure.
Thank you. There we are. That was Caroline Vincent from XR Scientists and XR Professionals. She does a lot of really amazing work with Extinction Rebellion, heavy research, lots and lots of informing and educating. She runs the Ask a Scientist Live broadcast. Hello. And there's Fergie.
Good job today.
Thanks, you too.
So hopefully the government will stand up and listen, but seems a little bit unlikely. So the best thing we can do is take to the streets again.
Yeah.
Remind them that we haven't gone away. In 2020, we're going to be back out in force.
Do you think we should sign off now, Ferg?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been Extinction Rebellion. live in London. The last 2.25 hours, that's a marathon. We have been with exiled professionals sounding the alarm across 8 government departments, delivering letters asking them to act on the climate and ecological emergency, as the CCC report came out today, saying that they are failing on literally every aspect of their targets to decarbonise by 2050, which in itself is too late. If you want to find out more, please head to rebellion.earth and you can sign up to your local group and join the rebellion and demand that the government acts against the biggest emergency of our lives. Thanks very much for joining. Bye.
All right.
Bye. Bye.